The production possibility frontier, also called production possibility curve, is a simple economic model that we'll use to illustrate a lot of the concepts that we've talked about, such as scarcity, opportunity cost, and so on. This production possibility frontier is a graphical representation that shows a combination of output or production of two goods that an economy can produce given a certain amount of resources or factors of production and technology, assuming that these resources and technology are used efficiently. A couple of assumptions that are important for this model. We're using only two goods. In that sense, it's a simplification of reality, but it's plenty to illustrate what we want to illustrate. Another important thing is that it has to be something that can be produced. So it could be different goods like corn and beef, guns and butter, which is a typical economic example, or groups of goods like consumer goods versus capital goods. Anything that can be produced, goods or services. The efficiency part of it, we're assuming that all the resources that we're using are used efficiently. So if you remember the efficiency that we talked about, it's full employment plus productive efficiency. This PPF, or production possibility frontier, is like a snapshot in time. So the technology is fixed, whatever is available at that time, and the resources are also fixed, whatever is available at that time. The resources, though, are common in the sense that they can be used to produce either good that we are working with. Here's an example of a PPF. So the numbers that you see here represent possible production of these two goods. So I picked video consoles and video games. And in a certain amount of time, so you could say per day, per hour, these are the number of consoles that can be produced. These are the number of video games that can be produced. And you'll look at each of those numbers this way. These are various combinations of consoles and games that can be produced. So here's one where you produce no consoles but 80 video games. And here's another one where you would produce one console and 75 games. So already this simple exercise helped us illustrate important things. What happened here when we added one console to our production? What happened to the number of video games? We lost 5 of them. Okay, and this illustrates the simple concept of scarcity. We only have so many resources. So in order to produce more of one product, we have to give up some of the other product. So to answer this question, what is the opportunity cost of adding the first console going to this new combination? Well, it's the 5 video games that you cannot produce. That's your opportunity cost. If you were to represent these numbers, these combinations of consoles and games that you can produce graphically, you would get something like this. You get a downward sloping line. What that shows you is that, first of all, you have scarcity. You cannot produce more video games and more console and more video games and consoles. So going this way is out of the question. You do not have the resources. Your only option is if you want to add one console. So if you add one here, you're gonna lose some video games. So for instance, if we go from this combination, which is A, to this one, call it A, B, C, D, right? You are going to gain plus 3 consoles. But in order to do that, you would have to lose 40, I'm sorry, not 40, but 30 video games in the process. So this simple downward sloping line illustrates the scarcity and the opportunity cost that we face in the economy. This combination here, 3 consoles and 50 games, represents a combination, a production for the economy that is possible and efficient. That's the maximum we can do. This other combination, B, which is 1 console and 40 games, you can see that this combination here is not any one of those, because it's a possible combination. We can do this, but it's not efficient because we can do more. We could be here and having, instead of 1 console and 40 games, we could have 1 console and 75 games. Or if we wanted 40 games, we could do more than 1 console. So anything that is inside the PPF in this area is going to be possible but inefficient. We can do better. This combination, on the other hand, 3 consoles and 90 games, is not on here either, because that's a combination that's impossible. Given the level of resources and technology that we have, we cannot get to this combination. Okay, so the PPF here, all the combinations on this line here represent possible combination that the economy can produce, and also efficient combination, maximum combination that we can produce. How can we go from A to C? What would be some ways to increase our production of games without reducing our production of consoles? That's how you get your economy to grow. To be able to do that is growing your economy. And so it's an increase in the capacity to produce one or more or both goods and services. So more games and more consoles, or more game or more consoles. And the way to do that is to improve your technology or your resources. And increase can be in quantity, so have more resources, or in quality, just better ones. You can do it through both. And graphically, you can see that the PPF is moving outward towards greater quantities of consoles and games. Economic growth allows us to produce more. And it's due to increase in quantity or quality of resources or better technology. And the great thing about economic growth is that it allows us to have more without having to sacrifice as much. So we sacrifice less for everything that we get. And in economics, we express this as saying that economic growth reduces the burden of scarcity. Scarcity is still there, but it's not as harsh and difficult. A few more words about opportunity cost. When we added the first console, we lost 5 video games. If we add another one, a second one, an additional one, we lose 10 consoles this time, going from 75 to 65. And if we keep going, if we add a third one, we lose even more video game for that one video console. We lose 15 this time. And this is a very important pattern that you find in the economy in general. The opportunity cost of each additional console keeps increasing. We need to give up more and more games every time. This is, in economics, a law that we call the law of increasing opportunity cost. Every time you see a law in economics, it's something that's been proven again and again, and that is present throughout the economy. And what it tells you is that the more you produce of one particular item, the opportunity cost for each additional unit will keep increasing, meaning you have to sacrifice more and more of the other good as you produce more and more. Why is that happening? The reason for this to happen is that our economic resources are not completely adaptable to alternative uses, and that goes for all the different kinds of resources that we have. We can use the resources to produce different things, but they're not going to be equally good at it, equally productive. If you have someone that is very good at designing video games and you put them in charge of actually making the hardware, they may not be that good. So the cost of producing those consoles would be higher. And that's what represented in this, through this law of increasing opportunity cost. Graphically, this law of opportunity cost is represented through the shape of the PPF. As you noticed, it was not a straight line. It was slightly bowed out. We call it bowed out. And that's because the slope is changing. The slope is getting steeper, meaning it's increasing. So as you produce more console, you can see the slope getting steeper. And that tells you that the opportunity cost is increasing. To contrast this with a constant opportunity situation, the line would be straight because the slope would stay the same. It would not be changing, and you would have a straight line. And the reality is closer to something like this, because in reality, increasing opportunity costs do exist. In summary, the PPF illustrates several concepts. Scarcity, because you have the downward sloping curve, and also because you cannot produce beyond that PPF, that's impossible. Trade-offs and opportunity cost. If you move down the curve, meaning if you want to increase the production of one good, you have to sacrifice production of the other good. Growth, it's through an increase in the quality or quantity of resources or the technology, represented by an outward shift of the PPF. You also have the law of increasing opportunity cost. You have to give up more and more of one good to increase production of the other. And that's reflected in the shape of the PPF being bowed out. And also the concept of efficiency. If a combination of good is located on the PPF, that means you are efficient. You're using all the resources and doing so effectively, efficiently. Another way of saying that is that you cannot produce one more item, any of the goods, without decreasing the production of the other good. If you were inside the PPF, if you were here, you could increase production of both at the same time. But if you're already here, increasing production of one means decreasing production of the other. Check the next video for some economic analysis using the PPF and some examples of problems and homework.